Hey guys, welcome back to Teens and Faith Catholic Conversations. I'm your host Annie, and I'm joined by my co-host Gianna.
Hey, what's up?
So before we get into this episode, we wanted to start off with our prayer. O Saint Philomena, Virgin and Martyr, pray for us that, through thy most powerful intercession, we may obtain that purity of mind and heart which leads to the perfect love of God. Amen.
Amen.
So Gianna, what do we have coming up this episode?
This episode, we will be interviewing Father Mckenna.
Yay! We had a lot of fun recording this one with him. So, again,
Yes.
big thank you to Father Mckenna for coming on. We've
Yep.
really enjoyed having you. It was super fun. So, Gianna, what have you been up to lately?
Um, Not much. I mean, we are going up to an island, I guess. So we're going on vacation, with my uncle, and we're going up to this island that my grandparents actually used to own. It's a very small little island, but yeah, so we're gonna do a bunch of fun stuff up there, I guess. I don't know. It has
That
to
sounds
be.
pretty fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And I am going on a vacation to Ohio to visit SGG for
Mhm.
the Fall Festival, which is coming up pretty soon. And I've never been there, so I'm super excited. You guys will get to hear all of my thoughts about SGG. Yeah, my whole family's going and then lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of school. So that's great. But, you know, high school.
Yep. You seem to hate school, Annie.
So now it's time to interview Father McKenna. So, Father, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, I'm Father Stephen Mckenna. I am the assistant pastor here at St. Gertrude the Great. I've been a priest for over 12 years, and my main thing has always been up to this point running and operating most of the missions that we have as the domestic missions, that is, as our apostolate, and doing all of that. And that's, I believe, how I know both you two is by coming and saying mass over the years at your respective locations, both Milwaukee and Grand Forks, North Dakota. So, and yeah, so that's who I am. I'm just one of the five of us here at St. Gertrude's.
So, do you have any advice for mission kids?
My advice for mission kids. Well, I have a couple of things. One would be that I would suggest, first and foremost, the importance of the daily rosary, because one of the biggest trials of being in the missions, as you guys can attest to, is that you don't always have mass readily available. And so, but the one thing that you definitely can have as a staple of your every single day, and is so powerful, is the Most Holy Rosary. Now, that should be really important for everybody to have their daily rosary. But I think it's even more important when you don't have the easy access to the regular mass all the time, because that is something that everybody can do and can do often. And we know Our Lady gives a lot of graces by doing so. I would also recommend for kids in the mission now, with modern technology and things like that, is uh, that there are certain things out there that are safe vessels, uh, like I know Dominic and Jaso runs that trad chat that I think both of you are part of, right? And
Yeah, that's
that's
how we met.
where a way, yeah. So that's a way that you guys can, young mission kids especially, but young people anywhere, can get in touch with other young traditional Catholics, because I think one of the temptations in a mission is to feel like you're sort of all alone, and that can get kind of uh, a little bit um, discouraging at times. And you're in reality, you're not. There's trad Catholics everywhere, all throughout the world. And by having a means to sort of get to know other traditional Catholics, I think that's a really good way to be able to realize that there are others just like you that are out there. Also, there are things like every year we run a boys' camp and a girls' camp here at St. Gertrude's, and we so that's not just open to our own parishioners, but if people wanted to travel in for the few days of the camps, then they could absolutely do so. And or that we have, yeah, or if your families are willing to make a little sort of like a special trip to one of the areas that has a bigger church. I think that's always a good opportunity to try to meet other traditional Catholics that are your age in that setting, because it is it again, it encourages you to realize that while there might not be a lot of people if you're in a mission at your location, there are a lot of other people out there in different places, and it's good to know that you're not truly alone. So that's a couple of things that I definitely would recommend for traditional Catholics in mission settings.
That's good.
All right, thank you. That's really good advice.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're wondering, how do you write your amazing sermons?
My sermons?
Yes.
Well, that's a great question. How do I write them? Well, it's I view sermons in two different ways. I view it as either and then they tend to overlap a lot of times, but I view it as a means of either teaching or as a means of sharing fruits of my own readings and meditations and things like that. And I think both of those are important. And not, like I said, a lot of times it ends up being two of this, some of both of those at the same time. But there are times when a sermon is very much a teachable moment, something that's based on the catechism, or something that is based on some sort of moral problem of the day, or an important societal problem or issue to be talked about, and then or corrections to be made in a general way towards things that are going on in Catholic life in general. And then some of them are very much spiritual type of things, or like I said, fruits of things that I find interesting. And so when I talk about saints, lives of the saints, well, that comes from just regularly reading the lives of the saints. And the more you read about the saints, the more you find there's a myriad of amazing things out there, and a bunch of saints that you've never heard of that you can always keep discovering. And when you read about it, then you if you like it and you find it interesting, you want to share those things with other people too. And so and I would recommend that would be another point to tie in as well to mission kids as to what to do, and any kids anywhere, is that follow the liturgical calendar of the year. And just because you may not have mass there on any particular day or whatever it is, each day has a different feast. Each day has different saints, or each season has different spirits to them and everything. And the more you can follow along with the liturgical calendar and say, oh, today is this feast day, and so I'm going to read about that saint, and then I'm going to learn about that particular thing. Now you're living the liturgical year, liturgical life, and that's a great way to facilitate that. But yeah, so that's a part of what I enjoy about the sermons, is that I get to share things that I find interesting. I'm somebody who went to school for a very long time. I went to college and got my degrees in college, and then I went back for seminary and everything. And when I went to seminary, I always liked learning, but when I went to seminary and you realize that almost all the things that you're learning about are things that you'd want to study anyways, and then you carry that on into the priesthood, and the things that you learn about, it's like, oh, our faith is so rich, our faith is so wonderful, that you can't help but want to not only learn it for yourself, but you should want to share it with other people as well. And so for me, that's why I think sometimes the sermons, people like my sermons, is because I honestly enjoy giving them. I honestly enjoy writing them. and I honestly enjoy sharing those things that I've read and learned about. And when you enjoy what you do, it comes off in the way that you present it. I also look at um, I also look at doing sermons as a craft, um, meaning that it is something that I view as something that I can always get better at. I'm always working at. It's my craft in my occupation. And so as time goes on, I hope that they are getting better and better because it's something that I'm always looking at. If you remember, and I feel the same way about when I do podcasts too, that it's a craft that I work at. I think I was talking to you, Annie, last time I was up in the mission in North Dakota about this very idea
Yeah.
that I always am my biggest critic towards my sermons and towards my own podcasts because I am always looking to find areas that I need to do better in. And I don't mind the fact that I'm not perfect because I know I'm not perfect. And so I'm not surprised when I find things that aren't done well or could be done better and things like that, because that's the area that I start working a bit more on. And so my sermons tend to hopefully get better as time has gone on because it's something that I'm always trying to do better at, to make it a true craft. I can't draw. I don't know how to play an instrument. So this is my artistic output, but it's something that it's also something that it's my way of being creative. But more importantly, it has an important subject matter, and so I really view it as a craft and an important craft that is important for everybody else. And so I think of it as in terms of what would I want to hear in a sermon? What would I want to listen to? And if I approach it from sitting in the pew and work my way backwards, then it helps me to write a sermon in a way that I think is going to be effective for people and enjoyable for people who are listening to, hopefully.
All right, that was really cool to hear kind of how you like write your sermons. And if you guys have not heard his sermons, they are on the SGG YouTube channel, and then I think St. Hugh of Lincoln posts some, right, Gianna?
Yeah,
Yeah, so you guys need to go check them out. They're phenomenal.
they are.
They're all right.
So, what would you recommend to people like about vocations? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So vocations, that's a good question. So obviously, not everybody's called to do the same thing, right? And I think that's important to realize is that if one person's called to the religious life or to be a priest or they're called to be married, regardless of what it is that they are called to do, it is important that they follow what God calls them to do, because that is that is the your the best way for you to do God's will and to ultimately get yourself to heaven. And to find your vocation. So your audience is obviously going to be young people who are not yet adults and still trying to learn about what maybe their vocation is. It has to You have to pray about it. You have to ask God to show you what you want to be, what He wants you to be as your vocation. But then secondarily, you need to have truly an open mind towards whatever that might be. That it's okay. Like, don't think that one is better than another because as long as it's what God asks you to do, then that's going to be then you wouldn't want to do something else because God called you to one, but you think that let's say a young boy um, thinks, oh, it'd be really great to be a priest, but God's calling him to be married. Um, well, he probably wouldn't make it through seminary anyways. But even if somehow he managed to do it regardless, it would be not what God wanted him to do, it would be sort of what he wanted to do. And the reality is that yes, we need more good priests, but we only want people who are really called to be priests. And most people are called to be married. And that's good. That's important. And so it's honestly praying to know God's will for your vocation, and looking for the inspirations that how God talks to you about what that will might be. He's not going to write a letter to you. He's not going to, have an angel come down with a big sign holding it up saying like, "Hey, Gianna, this is your vocation," and has like flashing lights on it or something. He's going to give much more sort of subtle indications and little ways of kind of drawing you near. But if you are earnestly praying and you're keeping an open heart about it, then you'll start to recognize the pattern of those little signs over time, and you'll begin to realize, I think this is what I'm supposed to be as a vocation. And then once you kind of settle on that thing, then pursue it with all earnestness to go after it. And so put yourself, as if you're a young person like yourselves, it's more right now is the time where you're praying for that vocation. When you get a little older, it's sort of the time where you're getting yourself set up in life to be able to follow that vocation. And once you get to a point in life where you're able to actually pursue the vocation, then it's going out there and doing the things that are necessary to actually follow through with that vocation. So
That's really good, and I think that's a most asked question by a lot of people, especially now at this age. So that would be really good. That's really good to know.
yeah, I think sometimes people feel like they're pressured to do one way or another. Sometimes I think sometimes even parents, even the really good parents, unknowingly pressure them towards one way or another. It's not to say parents should be dismissed or not paid attention to. Obviously, there's a lot of really good advice and knowledge of how the world works, and they do have your your well-being in mind when they're giving advice and things like that. We should never dismiss them, but a vocation is something that is intimately known between you and God. And so it really should be approached with a very much an open mind and open heart to whatever God wants, and then following through from there.
Yeah. All right, so moving on kind of a lot. I don't know if anybody knows this, but Father Mckenna was a really good baseball player in like high school and stuff. So we're wondering, what position did you play in baseball?
The old baseball days. So yeah, I was a first baseman, and I typically batted cleanup, that's the number 4 hitter in a lineup, because I was a good hitter and I hit with a lot of power. And so yeah, I played baseball, like you said, all through high school. I also played in a bunch of sort of elite summer leagues, and then I played one after I graduated high school. It was when I was at the end of high school was when so for those who don't know, I didn't grow up practicing Catholic. When I was a kid, we didn't really go to church all that often. It's something that I came to later on. And so when I was 18, when I was really starting to get very much involved in not only going to mass and things like that, but also doing a lot of work with a Catholic nonprofit organization that me and some friends had started. And it, was very much I think it's what sort of propelled me forward towards ultimately having a vocation to the priesthood. It was like some of those early signs towards that end of how much work and involvement I was doing involved with the church. But I realized I couldn't do both that and play in college, and so I decided not to play in college. Because I realized I couldn't do both, and I wanted to, at that point, I knew I should probably choose the more important thing. But I did, I had some friends that were very good baseball players that were playing in a semi-pro league that summer, and so they sort of begged and pleaded with me. So I played the one summer season on a semi-pro team, and then I hung them up for good after that. So
All right. I think Kevin Davis was saying one time on the Catholic Family Podcast, maybe baseball makes good priests. So you never know.
I don't know. I'm kind of the only one that I know of that was a baseball player. So that's I don't know if that's a winning track record or not. In fact, I think I'm recording a show with him very soon on sports in general.
Ooh, okay.
Okay.
So that should be interesting.
I think my brothers will like to listen to that. They're obsessed with baseball.
So yeah, I did play baseball back in the day. So
Actually, this is our next question. Is it okay for Catholic teens to play sports?
well, I think that I think that it's good for kids to be very active, to be outside, to be playing, especially if you have other traditional Catholics near to your age in the area, to get out, to exercise, to play, and to play games and sports and things like that. I think the differences between that and playing, what I would classify as organized sports, meaning that you're playing for like official teams and official capacities and things, because um, the older that you get in those areas, you'll find that there's a lot more pressure to prioritize the sport rather than the things that are actually important in life. And also that um, the atmosphere in a locker room for a sports team oftentimes becomes one that you wouldn't want to be putting yourself in. It opens up a lot of occasions for sin. It opens up being around a lot of bad company. And like I said, the higher a person goes up in those type of things, the more pressure there is to put a lot of focus on not only playing that sport, but also training for that sport. And it's not in appropriate order of the way things are supposed to be done. And it becomes harder and harder to live a good Catholic life, and also to try to be able to play in sports as you go along. So I think sports as a fun recreational activity are great. I think that the trappings of what today's modern sports culture is not necessarily in line with a good Catholic life. So that would be my distinction there.
Okay. Yeah, that's
All
good
right.
to know.
Yeah, because I know sports is like a very controversial topic among Catholics. So
Yeah. I think it's like many things. Like the thing itself is not bad, but what it's become in our society is not good. And
Mhm.
also with the atmosphere and the people that you put you around is, like I said, it leads to just a lot more bad influences, and that's not what we want to put ourselves unnecessarily in. But when you can get together and play, like we have our boys camp every year, and a lot of the stuff that we do down at the park is play sports. We go and we play ultimate frisbee, and we play kickball, and we play soccer and football, and different things like that. Um, and um, and it's a lot of fun, and it's great. But it's the way it's meant to be. It's meant to be everybody's just out there having fun. Nobody's taking it too seriously. It's meant to be exercise and a good time where everybody has good recreation and fun. It's not supposed to be something too serious.
So moving on a lot again. So I know some people can feel pretty nervous to go to confession, like
Mhm.
even when you become a teenager and stuff. So we're kind of wondering how can you like not feel nervous for confession?
Hmm. Good question. Well, I think one thing that is very helpful in that regard is if you understand the mindset of a priest who's hearing confessions, then it helps you to be more at ease to go to confession. So, what I mean by that is my purpose for being there to hear confessions is to forgive sins. I'm not expecting you to come in there and tell me that you haven't done anything wrong. I'm there because I'm expecting that you do have sins that you want to confess, and I'm there to take them away. And it's much like the story of the mindset of a priest is much like the story of the father who, when he treats the prodigal son, that he rejoices that the prodigal son has come back. And so when a person falls into sin, when he comes to a priest to confess his sins, the priest is just happy that the person is sorry for their sins and wants to have them taken away. And he can't wait to actually take them away. He's not sitting there thinking, oh, so and so is such a naughty person, such so, or this, this person, I can't believe you would do that. First and foremost, it's also good to know that there's nothing I haven't heard before. I mean, you'd have to be so extraordinarily creative to come up with something I've never heard before that you wouldn't want to be that creative in committing sin. Let's put it that way. So anything that is worrying you about going to confession for, don't be worried about it. I've heard it many times before, and the reason why. And so I'm there to take away your sins. So as long as you're sorry for your sins and you're going to try to do better moving forward, then you should want to come to confess your sins. Also, along with it is that reality. If it's something that is making you feel embarrassed or feel bad about, well, don't look at it as like, I don't want to confess this, or I'm struggling to confess this because I'm embarrassed and I feel bad about it. But rather think of it as the reason why you're feeling embarrassed and bad about it is that sin is weighing on you like a burden placed upon you. And the quicker you get rid of the burden on you, the quicker you take away that anxiousness about it and that worried aspect of it. So you actually want to go to confession as quickly as you can, because you get to unload that weight and that guilt that you're feeling right then and there, because now okay, I've made things right with God, and now I can try again to do the right thing and to do better. And so everybody goes to confession. When you show up to mass and you see this, there's always a line at the confessional. And so everybody's going to confession, and we priests all go to confession too. We're not perfect. We're striving for perfection, but we're not perfect. And so it's important to realize that that's why confession's there. It is meant for you to take the burden of your sins that you might have on yourself and unload them, so that you're not burdened by it, that you restore grace to your soul, and that you can better continue to work to please God moving forward.
All right. Thank you for that advice. I know that will probably help a lot of people.
Yes, definitely.
Very good.
What would you say was the hardest thing about becoming a priest?
About the process of becoming a priest,
Yes.
or in my priesthood?
The process of becoming one.
Okay. The hardest thing about the process of becoming a priest, I think a couple of things. One is that all of the things that we have to study, you're going to have like anything. This is something that you will relate to just as kids that are going to school yourselves, right? Whether it's homeschool or you do have a Catholic school that you can go to, whatever it may be, for people listening, you're all in school, and there are going to be certain subjects that you do very well in, and there are going to be certain subjects that are not your favorite subjects and that you have to work harder at to be able to. You can't skip them. If you don't like math and you really struggle at math, well, it's not like, well, I just won't take math through school. No, you have to work harder at it. It's not very enjoyable, but you do the best you can. Well, the same thing comes in seminary. Just because we're so far moved along in the education process, and everybody thinks, well, going to seminary will be just a load of fun because all you're doing is learning church stuff. Well, there's a lot of different subjects in that that are that some of which are you're more inclined towards, that you find more interesting and easier, and some things that you find a lot harder and are just a lot of work. And so there's that aspect that you're going to have times where you're struggling with your studies to get through all of that. I think the other thing that goes along with it is that I honestly believe that every, the process to becoming a priest requires a number of years of study. Typically it's a 6 year thereabouts. Places may differ one way or the other a little bit, and sometimes we're allowed to take classes in the summer or additional course loads and maybe shorten the duration a small amount, but not a lot. But if you think of it as typically a 6 year program of schooling on average, that's a lot of time as a seminarian. And as you're going through it, I believe that especially today, where we as traditional priests have to do a lot more in terms of different things, because there's not a lot of priests out there. So we have to travel, we have to do missions, and we have to handle certain situations that we might not have typically come across before the Second Vatican Council and things like that, when there was a lot of priests. Because that is sometimes difficult, I think that everybody's vocation to the priesthood at a certain point in time during seminary encounters different crosses along the way, and where it seems where you really have to sort of have that gut check of persevering through the difficulties and the crosses, and they're not the same for each person. Different people have different types of crosses that come their way, and it's the ones that persevere through the crosses that make it out the other side as priests. And so I think that in the process of becoming a priest, I think that's the two things: is applying yourself well to the studies that maybe don't come as naturally easily to you, and also persevering and seeing your way through whatever crosses may come your way in the process of being a seminarian.
That's really good stuff to hear.
What spiritual reading books would you recommend?
Spiritual reading books for young people. Well, like I said before, I think one thing that is very much overlooked, but now is very important, is to follow along and read the lives of the saints. So as you go and you figure out whose feast day is today, and whatever that you take time and read a little bit about those saints. I think that the saints' lives are what makes our faith super interesting, to realize that. And you realize in studying the lives of the saints that everybody has different personalities and different strengths, and things like that. And so it's nice to see that the saints are not all the same. And so you realize that whatever type of personality you have, whatever type of strengths you have or weaknesses you have to overcome and things like that, there's saints out there that you can relate to, and you can see that this person struggled with this thing too, and so that's a good saint for me to know about and to pray to, and for help for, and things like that. So, and then also, just like I said, learning and following along with the liturgical year, I think it's just so beneficial. Outside of that, I do think it's a really good thing for if you can get your hands on a copy of the Catholic Girls Guide or the Catholic Boys Guide by Father Lassans. Those things are very, very, very beneficial. I'm a big fan of the story of a soul. That's another really great one. Um, Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales is a great one. So things like that are all very, very good.
All
Yeah,
right.
those are good. I'll have to check those out.
Yeah, I've read part of the Catholic Girls Guide, and it's really good.
I would say this too, that there's, I would say this, that as
Great.
there's so many other Catholic books out there, um, so maybe you read something from Butler's Lives of the Saints about a saint, and then you think, oh, that saint's really interesting. Well, then you can maybe try to find a book about that saint and learn even more about them. Or like I said, there's plenty of other spiritual books out there as well. And so sort of, being keeping your eyes open for good books. I think when it comes to our faith, if we find something that's written it's when we find something that's interesting, those are again, we're more likely to follow through to the end of the book if we find it interesting. We're more likely to learn stuff from it if we find it interesting and things like that. So while yes, we should all do spiritual reading, and sometimes we have to force ourselves to do so, uh, we are more successful in that when not that everything should be always what we just what we find interesting, but I think a lot of times. Uh, Embracing what we find interesting helps to keep us motivated to keep learning more and more. And I would also say this too, by the way, not so much spiritual reading, but it's really good for everybody, is that um, to review your catechism. You may have been taught catechism as kids by your parents and gone through your catechism classes, but don't be afraid to go back and study the catechism again or read about them again, because the more we know our faith well, then when the more solid it is for us in our hearts, and as well, it's one of those things that um, to this day, if I have the opportunity to teach catechism to, say, like an adult convert, I always leave from those catechism classes, even though it's something that I've gone over many times. I'm always leaving there with a better appreciation and a stronger, bit greater strength to my own faith every time I do.
It's good
Yeah,
to
and it's
know.
also really important to know your catechism so you can defend your faith as well, and knowing all those like little details about the Catholic religion.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we all know, I'm sure you guys have found even in your young lives that sometimes you'll run into people that will ask questions, and it's good to be able to have some answers from time to time for that.
Hmm. So moving on a lot again. What was your favorite episode that you've ever filmed on the Catholic Family Podcast?
Hmm. Favorite episode? That's a really good question. Um, I would say uh, I like a lot of the episodes that I have done. I especially liked uh, episodes. I do a lot of episodes where it's dealing with like pastoral and moral questions, and so it's hard to pick a favorite uh, amongst those, because I think they all sort of have their own merits and good things about them. So it's hard to pick a favorite. If I were to say what I think probably is one of my um, one of the most important episodes I've ever done, um, that might be an easier question to answer, and it might be a little bit. The episode is maybe a little bit deep for some of the younger viewers, just because it deals with a little bit higher plane of learning. Not that I don't think people should be afraid to view it, but I do think it is important. Um, is uh, is I believe the one I did on what is known as Hegelian dialectics is one of the most important episodes I've ever done with the Catholic Family Podcast, because while it's uh, the philosophy of Hegel is a modern philosophy that is is chock full of problems and errors. I think understanding how that affects directly into our society today and what we see around us, whether it be we especially see it in politics, we see it in various other aspects of our lives. That for people who take the time to actually to go and listen to that, you will come out with a much better understanding of viewing the world and modern society through that episode. So, like I said, that one being the most important, might not necessarily coincide with your target audience of young people necessarily, because it's a little bit of a higher plane thing. But I think for any adults who tune in, or older teenagers and things like that, it's one that is, like I said, probably one of the more important ones in terms of actual information that is pertinent to today's life. I think that that's a really, really good one. Another one, which again is probably more for adults and older, older teenagers, that I think was really important and also really good, was the one I did with Dr. Dan Stanislawski when we talked about dopamine. That's another really important, I think, too, and the effect of a lot of the modern gadgets and screens and things like that has on society. Those two are very, very important ones that I think. But I've done so many, and I like to think that usually I try to pick topics that I find either interesting or important, or both, when I do those type of shows. So it's hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah,
We are
understandable.
actually, yeah, we're gonna have Dan on, and he's gonna talk about dopamine, but he's gonna dumb it down for teenagers a little bit, because like our generation is super addicted to screens. So
Oh, for sure.
yeah,
Yep.
we're excited to hear what he has to say about that.
Oh, it'll be a really, really good one. Yeah, that's really important, and people should look forward to that show. That'll be excellent. So,
So I'd probably say you're one of the main missionary priests, and at least over here, and you do a lot of traveling. Uh, how was your visit to Ecuador? Like, you visited the Our Lady of Good Success, like the church down there, I think.
yeah, yeah, I went to Quito twice a number of years ago. I loved Quito. Quito was great. Really, really beautiful area. Or if you're looking on a map, it's on the western side of South America, and it's pretty much right on the equator itself. But the altitude of Quito is close to 10,000 feet above sea level. So even though you're on the equator, every day is like in the 70s. It's beautiful. And you're up in the mountains with all these volcanoes and mountains all around. And there's a lot of Catholic history there between Mother Mariana, who had the visions of Our Lady of Good Success, and also in her body is incorrupt. I was actually able to see her body. In fact, when I got to go in to see, so the body of Mother Mariana is actually inside the cloister of the sisters, the nuns who run the convent where Our Lady of Good Success statue is kept, and the statue a lot of times is in the cloister too. So it's there's a couple times during the year where the statue's put out for public veneration, but other than that, it's usually inside the cloister, so it's not always available for public display. But I was able to get a tour inside the cloister, and I was able to see both the statue of Our Lady of Good Success up close, and then the incorrupt body of Mother Mariana, which at that time they were building a new tomb for her. So she wasn't even in her tomb. She was in a room, and I was able to actually walk right up to her body and then even touch it, which was pretty cool.
Oh wow, okay.
So that was really neat. Um, and then there's and then in addition to that, there's the vision of the infant Jesus of Pichincha, which is another really interesting vision where the child Jesus is wearing priestly vestments, and was took place on the top of a mountain. which is about 14,000 feet, which I was able to go to the top of as well. That that vision came, and then there's of course, um, and this is really good for anybody, but especially I think Catholic boys. Um, if you wanted to read about a really interesting character, is the one of the presidents of Ecuador. His name was Gabriel Garcia Moreno, and he was president in the 1800s. And he fought for the rights of the church in Ecuador, consecrated the country to the Sacred Heart, and ultimately died as a martyr for the faith as president. So imagine having a president of your country who's also a martyr for the faith. It's pretty
Wow.
neat.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
and
that'd be pretty cool.
yeah, and there's some amazing churches, some really beautiful churches. The people were very delightful, and it was a really neat place. So, yeah, tried to get a mission going there. It never really took off too well, and they really needed to get a priest who was a native Spanish speaker, or at least one who was very fluent in Spanish for any chance of it really growing. And but it was just a small little group that were interested when I first started going down, and so I tried to get the ball rolling a little bit so that they could continue on afterwards and find get them set up with maybe a different priest or whatever. And I don't think it ever completely took off. It's one of those things, but I made the first inroads in the attempt, anyways, to do so. But it was a really great experience.
Well,
That's what.
sounds like a pretty fun trip.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's still going on, but I heard that there was a rivalry between you and Bishop McGuire for a little while.
A rivalry for what?
I'm not really sure, just going back and forth with different things. Maybe when Bishop McGuire was still a priest. I don't know.
Well, I don't know what the specifics of that would be, but I think Bishop McGuire and myself, we've ever since we've worked together, we've always been very good friends, and um, so we've always had good banter back and forth. We would make jokes, and we'd and it was always in good fun. It was never anything serious in any way, shape, or form. But I think that's one of those things that always it makes, we have to do all the work that we do, and having people that you can not only be friends with, working with you, but also people that you can make jokes or kind of have uh exchange little jabs and everything. It keeps morale up very good, and it keeps everybody sort of happy, and it allows you to realize that we can do very serious business and still enjoy ourselves in the process of doing it. um I know that for a little while, sometimes we would have little rivalries of coming up with puns from time to time. That was always sort of a fun thing to come up with little puns. But I would never say that there was never a real rivalry between us in any way, shape, or form. But in terms of uh, in terms of having good banter and kind of being able to make jokes and do things like that, we've always sort of had that. In fact, just this past week, because the as we're recording this now, the bishop is actually on his vacation, and so I've never been a cat fan. I don't like cats. Not a big fan of cats. Bishop Dolan always had cats, and since he's died, the cats have still stayed, and so we have cats here. A couple of cats, and Bishop McGuire writes about them in the Bishop's Corner, and he's taking a liking to the cats as well. So they're sort of like they've changed hands from one bishop to another, as it were, the cats. And so I always sort of make jokes about how, I don't, that when he goes away, if something bad happens to the cats, it's not my problem, type of thing. And so the other morning, I was joking with him in text message because, he left, and of course I have to take care of the cats while he's gone. Well, unbeknownst to me, one of the cats got sick on the chair in the living room, and I didn't see it. And so when I went out and had my cup of coffee in the morning, I sat down in my chair, and then all of a sudden realized that the seat of my pants was wet because I had sat in cat vomit. And
Oh
so
no.
I so I so I had a good fun in going back and forth with him about the cats because of that situation. So
Oh man. Yeah, cats aren't the greatest animal ever. I'm more of a dog person, so
yeah, I would say if I had to have the choice between the two, I would definitely choose the dog as well. But I also didn't really grow up with much in the way of pets, so I'm okay with not having pets at all. So it's but he grew up always having pets in his as a child all through his life, and I think he's more of a dog person too. But there's the realization on our part as priests that the dogs require a lot more attention than cats do, and we are so often coming and going that it'd be hard to have a dog because that dog would not get that level of attention that probably it would probably want, to be a happy dog. So,
yeah.
whereas cats don't care because they're basically psychopaths.
Yep, that's that's true. My
Yeah.
mom, she like never lets us get any animals. My dad wants a dog so bad, but my mom absolutely refuses. But we had cats for a little while, and hopefully we can convince her to get a cat again, but probably not.
We used to have a black one, and we thought it was possessed for the longest time because she would just hiss at everybody.
Oh man.
Well, and Annie, I could sort of see your mom exactly saying that, and to her defense, if you need pets, you have all your younger siblings, so that sort of counts, right? So,
Yeah. I like to joke my little brother Nicholas is like my dog because he's very wild. So
yeah, exactly, yeah. It's like sometimes little siblings can be pet enough, can be animal enough. So,
yeah.
Mhm.
So my mom and I were just talking today, and we were talking about how people nowadays are kind of looking for more meaning in life, and
mhm.
they're turning to religion doing that. So I had a friend who is interested in becoming a Sede Catholic. So I was teaching her the rosary because she didn't have any other way to learn it, and we were praying the rosary together. And I'm wondering, since she already knows the rosary, is it still okay to pray with her? Because she's not fully Catholic yet? Or should I just let her do that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely. I think not only is it okay, I think it's a very good thing to keep praying with her and do, especially the rosary. The every every conversion story of somebody who becomes a traditional Catholic that I've ever come across, I always say this, that when somebody becomes a traditional Catholic, their stories are all different, but what is always included in there, in somewhere in their story, is, and then I started praying the rosary. And that's the universal, like, across the board. There's always a part to that, and so I think not only is it okay, I think it's a very, very good thing that you keep doing stuff like that with your friend, because that's those are graces that she's gaining towards conversion, that keep working on her soul, and it comes through the way of charity from you in presenting them. And so no, absolutely, that's a very, very good thing.
My friend actually listened to one of your sermons because she said she'd been watching these like Novus Ordo church services on YouTube, and I was like, nope, we're not going to do that. I'll just show you like the real ones. And we found one of your sermons, and it was on the rosary and conversions. And this was like a week after I taught her the rosary, and she was just like blown away. She was like, how did your priest know exactly what I needed to like hear? Like, did you tell him that? Like, how did he do that? I was like, it's kind of just Father McKenna's thing. So
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's, a lot of times, the when it comes to things like that, God, the hand of providence is in all things, and so God will arrange things that one person does something that he or she doesn't know why she does that, or just as part of their normal, just happens to be, but it's at the right time for the right person to hear it. So oftentimes when I preach sermons, somebody will come up to me and say, Oh, I felt like you were just talking almost directly to me. It's exactly, I was struggling with that exact question, and I didn't know. I have no idea. I'm never preaching a sermon, pointing at somebody in the pew, thinking like I'm preaching for this one person or whatever it is. It's just, but God's providence arranges it that that He that's that's maybe I'm inspired by that thought in the moment, and because it serves a purpose somewhere completely in a different area. So that's one of the great things about having a truly good and all powerful and all knowing God. He does good things like that.
Yeah. My family, we always joke that like the SGG priests have cameras in our house because it's like every single Sunday you say like exactly what we need to hear at the exact time. It's crazy.
I promise you, we do not put cameras in your house. That's I can see the comments blowing up now with his priest spying on people. That is not true.
So we have one more question for you. And
Okay.
so Gianna and I, like we've said a million times, are mission kids. And there's nobody my age at my church, nobody really Gianna's age at her church. So at what point is it okay for teenagers around our age to start talking with the adults more?
Um, I think that your age is a sort of an interesting time in your life because you're not little kids, but you're also not adults. And so I don't think you should be afraid to um, be in conversation with adults at any given time. Because if you can be there and you're not being a bother to adults and things like that, not only, and I don't think it just applies to just people where you don't have necessarily peers at your missions. I think even places where there's a lot of people who are your age, if you guys were here at St. Gertrude's, for instance, there might be a bunch of kids that are your age. And yes, while I think the majority of the time should be spent with those kids, I don't think you should be afraid to be occasionally in an adult conversation uh, because it is through those things that sometimes we can learn, sometimes we can uh, ask questions and grow and things like that. I would say this though um, that is the understanding that if you do have other people that your age, then it's good to be part of those conversations. But then it's also don't don't just be part of those conversations. Go off and have fun with other people that are your age and things like that. Have your own conversations. Uh, but but uh, um, but I would say this that when you're part of an adult conversation, um, don't be surprised or put off if you also get dismissed at a certain point, because sometimes adults will have questions that they want to ask, but they don't want younger people to hear, or subject matters that might not be necessarily what young people need to be part of and things like that. So it's not any kind of personal slight or anything like that. It's just a recognition that sometimes the conversation is perfectly appropriate and fine for you to be there for, and sometimes it might not be that, or sometimes as adults, sometimes they just especially whether it be with their own adult friends or when there's a priest around, sometimes it's fine to have kids around, but then there comes a certain point where they want to be able to just talk as just amongst themselves too, and it might not even be a topical thing. So don't be off put if you get like told to go away. It's not because you've done something wrong, or it's not because that it's bad for you to be part of adult conversations. It's just that sometimes it's perfectly fine, and sometimes uh, adults just want to be with just the adults talking and things like that. And it doesn't mean you should come back the next time and participate in the conversation too. So I do think that a lot of times when you are sort of part of those things, that it's good to do probably a little bit more on the listening side of it than it is to interject all the time. Because again, if it's a truly an adult conversation, then you know it's it takes on a little different dynamic. But no, I don't think you should ever be afraid to be part of it, and your parents will let you know that if they need you to go somewhere else or do something, or if you can, or if they let you stay. So it's just so I would never shy away from it. I would never be afraid of it. Just know that sometimes you might be told, you know, to scoot along, and if you do, then no, it's time to like not don't like go away and sort of hide around the corner to try to listen in, because you're being probably sent away for one reason or another. And so at that point, okay, this is not my conversation anymore. I will go and do whatever. So but don't I don't think you should be afraid of it at all. Part of turning into an adult, so is that you start wading your way into that water a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you for that
Yeah.
advice, because that's will definitely help Gianna and I, and hopefully some other mission kids too.
For sure, for sure. Was that your last question? Do I get to ask questions now?
If you want, I guess, sure.
Okay, I have a couple questions. I know you've only done this for a short little time so far, but number one, how are you guys enjoying doing the podcast? Are you guys having fun?
Oh yeah, we love it.
Yeah,
We will
definitely.
like be on call every day, like planning stuff. It's probably like our favorite thing to do now. At least it's mine. I've really fallen in love with podcasting.
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
nice
cool.
hobby to have.
Excellent.
It's really good.
Very good. Number two, what is your, I know you've only done a few. What would you say is your favorite interview so far? And don't say
That's
me because I'm on the line.
oh man. Okay, interviewing Holly from the What is a Woman podcast was awesome, because I've been listening to their podcast for a while, so that was crazy. And then I don't know, my dad's interview was actually pretty fun. And then all the teenagers, just getting to know them's been really awesome too.
Yeah.
What about you, Gianna?
Um, I don't know if I have a favorite. Uh, so far I really liked this one girl that came on, Nasumi. Uh, I thought the way she explained everything and all of her answers to things, that was really cool and fun to listen to. So I think that was my favorite so far.
I was just listening, Annie, to your dad's podcast today, actually. So that was fun.
Yeah, he's
Uh,
been asking about that a lot.
and then, who would be somebody that you would really either you have lined up to be interviewed, or somebody that you would really like to interview that you would hope to get someday?
That's hard. So we're like we said, we're having Dan Stanislawski on, so we're really looking forward to that. And then what would be really awesome is if we got Kevin Davis on sometime, or maybe even Bishop McGuire. Those would be like crazy cool.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm supposed to do an interview with Kevin tomorrow. Maybe when I'm off air with him, I'll ask him if he's interested in coming on. How about that?
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Okay. And then Bishop's away on vacation, but I do know him a little bit, so maybe if he can work it into his busy schedule, maybe he can come on at some point too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
So
coming on, Father. And before we let you go, do you have anything else you want to add?
no, this is great. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I had a lot of fun.
We did too. Thanks.
Yeah. So that wraps up this episode, and thank you guys so much for watching.
And yeah, we are kind of like mixed up with everything right now. So I'm not going to be able to explain to you what we're doing next episode
Because we
because
don't know.
yeah, exactly. Because it's all over the place right now. Everything is coming out in a different order and
It's a little crazy, but it's okay. God and Saint Philomena have really been helping us, and Our Lady, so we're just always super thankful and blessed for that. So, yeah, as always, God bless, and Saint Philomena,
powerful is God.
pray
Pray
for
for us.
us.